"It's not fair to judge me as a man," said Henry Hollis, looking me directly in the eye. He wore an orange jumpsuit, sweat-stained at the armpits and the crotch. His eyes were very pale, the milky placid blue of a winter sky. Looking into him, it was hard to believe he'd be capable of any crime more serious than forgetting to pay a parking fine. His lank blonde hair was pasted to his scabby forehead, which gleamed in the prison's fluorescent lights. "I'm not a man," he said. "I'm a real-life dinosaur." I didn't laugh. It was my job to take him seriously. I looked down at his hands, shackled to the table, the greasy fingers intertwined. "We've been over this, Henry. You're judging me by man's law, but I'm not. It's like if you put a dog on trial for being a dog, like it's the Middle Ages or something. Dogs that bite get put down, Henry. You can't condemn something for acting according to its nature. You wouldn't blame a flower just for growing." "I can't take that to court," I said patiently. "I can get your sentence commuted to life in prison, Henry, if you can convince the jury your history of abuse constitutes a mitigating circumstance. Your mother and her cigarette butts, your foster parents' shed in the backyard, that thing in juvie with the block of cement. You've had a rough time. It's no surprise you retreated into a fantasy life. But the jury needs to understand your situation. They need to believe that you know what you did was wrong. They need to know that I'm a dinosaur. I can't make them believe that." Hollis screwed up his eyes, his whole face wrinkled in the agony of the thought. He'd lost some weight in prison, but he was still a heavy-set man. The edge of the table pressing against the baby fat of his gut, and the cuffs digging into his flabby arms. He'd worked in a series of gas stations in the South Texas plains, eating candy bars off his shelves and reading gossip magazines all day, before winding up here. According to the owners, he'd never been anything other than a model employee. Strange how these things work sometimes. "Listen," he said, I was a good dinosaur. I know you believe that, Henry. By dinosaur standards, I did what dinosaurs were supposed to do. I hunted well, I looked after my mate, I laid my eggs in the right spot on the riverbank. I was a lady dinosaur, I think. If we can just come back to your trial. That's why I was reincarnated as a man, said Henry. It was my reward, but something went wrong. Mister, do you think God makes mistakes sometimes? I don't know. I was supposed to be a man, but I'm not. Really, I'm still a dinosaur on the inside. I looked down at the manila folder sitting before me on the table. I'd seen pictures in Henry's file. The tooth marks, the face of the young woman he'd left alive, who'd drag herself back to the highway across 15 miles of prairie. I'm opposed to the death penalty, always, under any circumstance. The state has no right to take the lives of its citizens. But sometimes, I sympathize with the people who disagree. Henry, do you know what happens if you keep insisting that you're a dinosaur? Yeah. Pentobarbital, the drug that killed Marilyn Monroe. It's painless, they say. They'll pump it straight into your veins and you'll stop breathing in your sleep. Okay. What, you think it won't kill you? You think being a dinosaur makes you strong enough to fight it off? Or you think the jury will let you off? It's a human jury, Henry. Maybe a jury of dinosaurs would have different standards. You know how I died, said Henry. I know how you're going to die. A brachiosaurus. A big one. That was always my favorite in the sandbox as a kid. He stomped on me, cracked my ribcage. I need you to think about what's happening now, Henry. I couldn't move. My leg bones didn't work anymore. I lay there in the sun for 3, maybe 4 days. The rest of the pack, they knew where I was, but they weren't going to do anything for me. No point in wasting food on a useless hunter. Could have put me out of my misery with a nip, but my neck skills were tough. It would have been a waste of energy. We're running out of time. It was terrifying. Lying crippled on the cracked mud of the plains, knowing no help was coming, snapping at pterodactyls, knowing once I got weak enough, they'd come and eat me alive. But then something incredible happened. A miracle of God. I woke up. The trial's tomorrow. Okay. Do you realize that? It's your last chance on this earth. I woke up in this body. This bald little rodent body, plump and ripe for the long winter. But knowing what I really was, not everybody gets to be so lucky. I rubbed my eyes. It was hot in this concrete cell, and the whine of the fluorescent lights was getting to me. Henry smiled at me, his lips pale and sticky, his tongue darting out of the corner of his mouth like a lizard's. "It's not so bad," he said. "You think if you're executed, you'll come back? Like, be reincarnated again?" "I'm pretty sure." "But in what body? You haven't been very good, Henry. What do you think your karmic reward's gonna be next time?" Henry shrugged, the muscles moving under his huge shoulders like continental plates. A bead of sweat scrawled down his chubby neck, soaking into the collar of his jumpsuit. "I guess it depends," he said, "on whether I'm judged by a man's standard or a dinosaur's." I haven't thought about that conversation in 7 years. I skipped the execution. Too many other things to deal with. Henry was far from my only client. I'd given him a chance, but my time was better spent on someone else. I was pushing a cart full of pickles and ice cream around Whole Foods when I got a call telling me he was gone. He'd eaten 2 steaks, raw and bloody, along with a Dr. Pepper and a huge serving of sweet potato pie, before lying down quietly and letting them stick the needle in his arm. I couldn't help feeling relieved. I told you how I felt about capital punishment. And of course, in principle, I was outraged. But in practice, I felt the world could afford to lose this one. I didn't tell anyone that. I put my head down and kept working, doing my best to keep people out of our unjust prison system, fighting against the current, trying to make the world a slightly less horrible place than it already is. And Henry Hollis was forgotten. Even the pictures in his file faded from memory. After all, you can see a lot of terrible things in this job. I understand human evil. I am a Christian. I don't believe in reincarnation. I believe in the immortality of the soul, and in God's justice for things that we do in life. I know that none of us are perfect. We'll always find a way to hurt each other. But we have the capacity to build a society that's fit for decent people to live in. My son's turning 6 now. The day he was born was the happiest day of my life. It was like a new star had been lit in the sky. There was more light in this world than there used to be. It made a better future seem within reach. "Why did you do that?" I asked him yesterday. We were sitting in the sandbox building mountains and rivers and galloping toys across the landscape. I dabbed at the blood trickling down my arm. "You hurt me, that's not a very nice game." My son smiled, showing me his teeth. "I'm playing," he said, clenching his hands into claws. "Look, Dad, I'm a real-life dinosaur."